Hello and welcome everyone. We're going to give folks a few minutes to join us and get settled in before we start. In the meantime, I wanted to review a Zoom feature we'll be relying on today to communicate. We'll be using the chat feature here in Zoom today. You can find the chat icon in your toolbar, either at the top or bottom of your screen. Click it to open up the chat panel. It automatically has your comments and questions only going to us hosts and panelists. But we'd love for everyone to see today's discussion. In the lower part of that panel, go ahead and click hosts and panelists and change it to everyone. That way we can all be involved in the chat today. Thank you, and we'll begin in just a few minutes. Stay tuned. Hello and welcome everyone. We're going to give folks a few minutes to join us and get settled before we start. In the meantime, I wanted to review a quick Zoom feature we'll be relying on today. We'll be using the chat feature here in Zoom to communicate with everybody. You can find the chat icon in your toolbar, either at the top or bottom of your screen. Click it to open the chat panel. It automatically has your comments and questions only going to us hosts and panelists, but we'd love for everyone to see today's discussion. In the lower part of that panel, go ahead and click hosts and panelists and change it to everyone. That way we can all be involved in the chat today. Thank you, and we'll begin within just a few minutes. Stay tuned.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Kate Hudson, and I am a current board member of MSJDN. I'm the Director of Federal Government Hiring. I joined the board of MSJDN because I wanted to contribute to an organization where I had seen firsthand, both in my own life and those of others, the impact this organization has on military spouses, their families, and the military community as a whole, not only nationwide, but worldwide. Welcome to our second event of 6 in this year's Making the Right Moves Conference, Reclaim 2021, pardon me. Welcome, this is our second event. The events are throughout October, and we hope that you will be able to join us for all of them. So continuing on this series, before we get started with the panel today, we have an award to give out. MSJDN's annual Volunteer Service Award recognizes an MSJDN member and their service to MSJDN and its mission. The Exceptional Service Award separately recognizes a military spouse for outstanding contributions to his or her community beyond the work done by MSJDN. This year, we've had such an outstanding slate of nominees that the board decided to merge these categories and award 2 Exceptional Service Awards. Our first recipient is Heidi Luanison. Heidi is recognized for her tireless contributions to the Veterans Consortium National Volunteer Corps. Heidi provides pro bono representation to veterans before the U.S. Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims, and she created a comprehensive resource guide for veterans and their families in the National Capital Region. For years, Heidi has regularly volunteered at pro bono clinics at the DC VA Medical Center, and in 2019, she enthusiastically helped launch a new pro bono clinic, providing a safe space for women veterans. And Heidi's commitment was unwavering even as the program pivoted to a virtual format this past year. Here's Heidi with a few words about her award win.
Military spouse JD. Hi, my name is Heidi Linnassen, and I want to thank the Military Spouse JD Network for the Exceptional Service Award this year. This is truly a reflection of the organizations that I work with, both the Veterans Consortium, TVC, and my employer, Dwayne Morris, both of which have an army of volunteers, both attorney and non-attorney, ready to help veterans and their families with legal issues. We've been able to start a women's clinic at the DC VA hospital, which has proven to be very successful despite COVID. We've continued our mission by moving to Zoom, like so many of us have had to do in all aspects of our jobs. So again, I just want to thank MSJD Network for everything they do, for being a sounding board when we need it for career advice or any other type of advice, because there aren't many attorneys that understand the military lifestyle and what it's like to be a military spouse or a military member. Thanks so much for choosing me. I know there are many other deserving attorneys out there in this organization that put so much out every day. Thanks again. And if you would like to volunteer, I forgot to make my plug, please feel free to reach out to me or to the Veterans Consortium on how to help veterans and women veterans in particular, if you would like. Have a great and wonderful meeting. Thanks.
And thank you and congratulations again to Heidi on her award. At this time, I'd like to get the panel started. So I'd invite all of the panelists today to go ahead and turn your cameras on so we can see your faces. I'll go ahead and start by introducing each of our panel members individually, and then we'll move to questions. Following the questions that I have ready for the panelists, please leave questions either in the chat or we'll discuss them at the end of the panel itself if time allows. So thanks very much for your patience as we go through this event today. Joining us today is William Brown joining us from USAA, which he joined in February 2020 as an attorney in the Corporate Regulatory Council Chief Legal Office after serving more than 20 years as an active duty attorney in the U.S. Army, Judge Advocate General Corps, attaining the rank of Lieutenant Colonel prior to his honorable retirement in 2020. In the CRC CLO, William is a member of a legal team supporting the build out and management of a legal risk management framework at the enterprise. William is the primary legal advisor to the Law and Regulation Library and Regulation Change Management teams that oversees the Enterprise Regulatory Library containing laws and regulations which govern the association. So thank you for joining us today, William.
Thank you.
No problem. Next, we have Susie Scanlon-Rabinowitz joining us. Susie, can you turn your camera on for me? There we are. Susie is founder and managing partner of SRG Legal Group, which is a woman-owned virtual law firm working with high-performing military spouse attorneys stationed around the globe. Susie has been recognized for her commitment to military spouses and was the previous recipient of the Homefront Hired Award by MSJDN in 2018. Susie is active in the pursuit of practicing law differently and has been working as a pioneer in the virtual law firm space and is an advocate for legal industry change. She literally wrote the book on new legal models, as Susie is co-author of Finding Bliss, Innovative Legal Models for Happy Clients and Happy Lawyers, a book focused on the future of the legal profession that was published by the American Bar Association in January 2015. So welcome to Susie. And next we have Claire Tracy, hi, who currently serves as Employment and Labor Counsel for Amazon. Claire's client groups include Amazon Physical, for example, Amazon Fresh and Amazon Books, as well as online retail, Amazon Fashion, Shopbop, Zappos, international and North American consumer and ER investigations. Before joining Amazon in 2020, Claire was Employment and Labor Counsel for USAA, supporting a number of businesses, including corporate investigations, the Federal Savings Bank, USA Savings Bank, talent, technology, and employee privacy. Prior to joining USAA, Claire was practicing in the Baltimore, DC, and Philadelphia offices of a national firm engaged in employment, construction, commercial, and mortgage banking litigation. Claire has also served as an Employment and Litigation Associate General Counsel for a quasi-government agency and clerked for an iconic Maryland judge. Also, Claire is a proud military spouse, and her husband is an active duty Army JAG stationed at Fort Bliss. Claire loves chatting about life as a military spouse, as I think we all do, and how to navigate a fulfilling career while serving. So thank you all for joining us today. As we go through, I'm going to, especially because we're in the virtual environment, apologize, one second. Because we're in the virtual environment, I will direct my questions directly to you, since we don't have body language and my head is not turning towards you, it's looking straight on the whole time. But again, feel free, if you have a point to add on a question that I directed to a different panelist, feel free to add your thoughts as well. Speak up, we're all here. So first, I'd like for each of you, since we've already introduced you, if each of you would talk a little bit about your experience working with and recruiting attorneys and military spouses. If we could start with Claire.
Yeah, that's a great topic. And thank you for having me this morning or this afternoon for the folks in the East Coast. So I love speaking to other military spouses about their journey. So what makes my journey a little unique is that I don't trail my husband. I live in Seattle. My husband, as Kate mentioned, lives in Fort Bliss in El Paso, Texas. And so we've managed a career where he's not allowed to call himself a geobatch, but we are not co-located. And so I love talking with military spouse attorneys in particular about their decision to either consider not trailing their spouse or kind of the trials and tribulations of deciding not to trail your spouse. And so although I'm not a recruiter, I regularly partner with people who have reached out and pair them with the recruiters. So I would say on any given month, maybe 3 or 4 military spouse attorneys are reaching out. I'm talking to them about how best to position their resume, what interests they might have, whether it's Amazon or some other company or just a different path, and how to address maybe some gaps in the resume that they perceive as a weakness, but how do we strengthen that resume? How do we tell the story on paper so that you can get the interview to tell the story in person? And then partnering them with the recruiters that, at least on the Amazon side and previously at the USAA side, how do we partner you with the recruiter who has the military acumen who can get you in the door? So that's kind of my story there.
That's great. Susie, can we have you talk about your experience?
Sure. So I think I may be a little different than everyone else here, and I have just an unbelievable amount of respect and admiration for military spouses and veterans. I do not fall into either category, and over the past several years have really been educated about the military lifestyle and the commitment that spouses make to this country. And recently there was an article in the Washington Post about the unspoken oath that military spouses make to America. And I was so moved by that article. So here at SRD, we're a virtual law firm. Anytime we need to hire someone new, we go to military spouses first. And we do that because we think it's really good business. We have about 70 people here right now. 26% or about 17 are military spouses and veterans. And we have found that they're really different than the rest of my colleagues here. Not that the others aren't good, but there is a work ethic, commitment, fearlessness that we just don't see anywhere else. And so we've been able to recruit through MSJDN. I believe that is in most cases how we have hired. And what is amazing to me is how active this community is. So lawyers on our team at SRD are responsible. They have said, oh, I know someone, and they continue to introduce SRD to other lawyers here. And it's been just a fantastic experience. And thank you, Kate, for having me. I'm really grateful to be on this panel today.
Great, thank you so much for sharing, Susie. And William, why don't you share a little bit about your experience at USAA?
Well, I became aware of opportunities at USA through a military spouse, judge advocate who was with USAA. So from a personal standpoint, and that's really what I guess I can speak from, not necessarily speaking for USAA, but personally, it has been an inroad for me. And also we have continuously reached out to various military spouses, and this network has been just an extraordinary partnership, and we're looking forward to growing, not just for the attorneys that are military spouses, but also looking at paralegals as well as paraprofessionals, legal administrators, and so forth. We've had that conversation before, and so we're looking to grow with the network as well. So.
Great, thank you all. So I have some questions for you today. I'll start with Claire. I know you said earlier that you have been a connector, basically putting military spouses in touch with recruiters, but on the whole, has the approach to hiring changed at Amazon in response to the pandemic? And have you seen as a bystander difficulty filling positions or noticing any gaps that you're looking to fill based on the new conditions of the pandemic?
Yeah, so not a recruiter, but from my vantage point, I think every company has changed with the pandemic. I think every company has been forced to really consider what our new way of working will be, which I think can only help military spouses, since we tend to have a very mobile career. In the news yesterday, our CEO, Andy Jassy, announced that we're going to have kind of team specific, my words, not his, but team, centric approaches to how we work, which I think, again, just opens up the doors for military spouses to have those conversations with either hiring managers or their current managers about mobility. Amazon has so many jobs out there for attorneys. I can't say in any trouble hiring is just like, we can't get people in the door fast enough because the growth of the company is just so outstanding. So I would say if you have any interest at all, check it out, see if there's something that speaks to you.
Great, thank you. William, actually, I'll turn back to you. Have you found that promoting USAA as military spouse friendly, and not just in your section, and obviously you're not speaking on behalf of USAA, but have you noticed that promoting the company as a military spouse friendly company has been a net benefit to the organization? And what is your opinion on what a company can do to find their first military spouse hire?
Well, to answer the first prong of your question, I think absolutely yes. I mean, USAA is certainly a company that, I mean, even right now we have over 2,100 jobs that we're advertising to hire in various areas, not just in the legal, and reaching out to various affinity groups that help connect with military spouses and dependents, for that matter. And so, yes, it is absolutely a net benefit from that standpoint. And so proactively, I'm a part of the Chief Legal Office Diversity, Inclusion, and Equity Committee, and part of the group that works to attract and recruit more attorneys of diverse backgrounds. And that diversity includes military spouses and dependents as well. So,
Apologies, they're mute. And what do you think that companies can do to find their first military spouse hire?
Well, I think do what we're doing now is to continuously pushing and posting information through various social media posts, job listing areas, and also building upon the relationships with organizations that know the unknowns that we don't know, and those that are looking. So this is part of bridging that gap. And I think it's has a tremendous upside from my perspective.
Great.
Yeah, Kate, if I can just add in, I think
course.
one of the ways that companies can really get engaged is doing what Susie did. Like, she set herself on a path to get educated. And I think a lot of companies can appreciate that there is a gap in military acumen. They might not know, what a PCS stands for, or how to translate a military resume, but I don't think a lot of companies have an appreciation for the fact that military spouse acumen is necessary too, and understanding kind of the challenges that military spouse attorneys in particular have. And so, a lot of companies have a commitment, Amazon has one too, to hire military and military spouses. But as companies make those commitments, to Rachel's point, in the chat, how do you really break down either purposeful, hopefully not, but purposeful or unintended barriers that are there that really get military spouses in the door? So it's not just lip service, but you actually understand, what underemployment is, what the gaps of employment are for. You know how to read a military spouse resume. You're not offering them an opportunity that they're just going to have to leave in a couple months. So how do you get companies engaged and have them form an appreciation for what those challenges and barriers truly are, so that you can start addressing them and breaking them down? And some companies may not be ready to do that immediately because of the way they're situated, but they can at least start to appreciate the gaps that they have. And others might be positioned to break them down immediately once they're more aware.
Yeah, I think you're both right. Education and outreach are two of the biggest practices that companies can engage with that. And thank you for pointing out Susie's example, because I'm going to turn to her now. Susie, obviously you have made hiring military spouses a key priority of your entire business model. Not just, it's not just the icing on this cake, it's your bread and butter, correct? So I want to ask you kind of a challenging question. And it's that sometimes companies recruit military spouses specifically because they expect to underpay them, or the employer sees it as charity to a marginalized population. What have you done since your model revolves so much around this? What have you done to value your military spouse or your mil spouse employees, and how do you frame the mil spouse team members to prospective clients? How do you proposition their value to your potential clients?
It's a really interesting question, and I think the answer has changed over time. I think originally when I got involved in hiring the first one or two military spouses, I had a view, oh, this is a nice thing to do. This is a nice layer to add to a woman-owned firm. I'm a member of NAMWOLF, it's the National Association of Minority and Women-Owned Law Firms. But what I discovered is that military spouses are truly fearless. They're bold, they're brave, they are team players, they are leaders. And the model here at SRD is very different from a traditional law firm. Most of our attorneys are independent contractors, and that works really well for military spouses. So instead of underpaying or marginalizing this population, if we have military spouses who have the benefit of their spouse's benefits through the military, we can pay them more because we don't have that same structure. Now, that doesn't work for everyone, but it certainly works for a lot of our attorneys here. And similarly, we pay our military spouses at the same rate that we pay our other spouses. So a lot of the work that we do at SRD, we pay our attorneys on a flat fee basis. And what this does is it provides equality across lawyers who work here, but also it goes back to something Claire mentioned about what they're doing at Amazon. which is an initiative to work more as teams. And we have a real team approach here. And that team approach creates flexibility. And what I have learned working with the military spouse community is remote is not enough. Having a portable job is not enough. You have to have flexibility. And those three things together, to me, are what makes SRD a really good home for military spouse lawyers. A combination of those three things. And the flexibility feature here, what that means is if you're on a team and on a Tuesday or on a Thursday, you don't want to take new work, you don't need to, because other members of the team will take that work. And when you talk about PCS, maybe later on, which is a term I didn't know about until I was educated by my team, the way we're structured as a team, a military spouse can step out for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever they need to move across the country, reestablish their home, get their families ready. And when they can, they just step right back into our structure.
That's great. It sounds like you're definitely comprehensively addressing those challenges that military spouses face in your model. And I love that you think nothing of just equality across the board. That's so refreshing to hear, because since that was a question that I had, it's something that we've seen in military spouse experience. I'm in the federal government, so not me, but I hear from colleagues around the private sector and in nonprofit world as well, that is an issue that they face in the workplace. And it's something that's difficult to challenge when you're a current employee and even after you leave an organization. So thank you for your honesty. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and one last thing, because I can't help myself.
Of course.
That inequality, right, of compensation, I think it comes from a place where military spouses have not had the benefit of being trained at a traditional large law firm that many companies expect, because they can't train the attorneys. And so it was 2 military spouses here who came up with an apprenticeship program to help train our lawyers who are military spouses and bring them up to speed. And during that training phase, trainees are paid at a different rate until they're fully ramped up, and then they're paid at the same rate as everyone else. And that program has been really successful, and it was started here by military spouses. Now I'll be quiet, sorry.
That's great. No, thank you. This is what we want to hear. Claire, you said something else?
I would just add, so I'm an employment lawyer, so whenever I hear about pay inequity, it causes me to cringe. I am a company side lawyer, not an employee facing attorney, but I would also just encourage all of us to think about the laws that are in place to help protect applicants and internal transfers as you're making those decisions, right? There's been a lot of bipartisan legislation that helps us ask those questions so that we can, because I think there's also, not to go too far, derail, but there's a gender component too. And so how do we kind of ask for what we think our worth is? But I think that's also another component. I think military spouses often feel like they don't have as much leverage as a traditional candidate because they're moving to a new place and perhaps this is one of few jobs that have been offered. And so I think find a way to articulate your worth, not as a disadvantage, but to Susie's points, all the superpowers that military spouse attorneys have. And be very familiar with the jurisdiction that you're applying to and what kind of questions you can ask to make sure that you feel like you're being paid appropriately.
Great. Thank you for adding that. I appreciate it. William, I have a question for you. What is the biggest challenge that you've seen to a military spouse getting promoted in the same way as a civilian peer? We've talked about possible wage inequality. Now I'd like to talk about possible promotion inequality. So what is the biggest challenge that you see?
Well, I'm not certain if it's the biggest challenge, but time and position could be a challenge because when you enter a new organization, you have to have time to learn their business, learn the areas of law that are practiced there, and also have an acute understanding of the regulators that regulate those organizations. And in addition to that, also to build relationships across the enterprise with the lines of businesses that you may support, the COSAs that you may support, that's what we call it here at USA, and become a part of a team outside of just the legal team, because you're working on various working groups, committees. And so there's a lot more to getting promoted than just being who you are. It's also being a part of the organization at large in order to bring more to the table. The other piece I wanted to talk about, if I could very briefly, how we talk about diversity, inclusion, and equity. Well, inclusion and equity aren't the same thing. And we don't all need the same thing when we move into a new organization. And so you talked about some of your apprenticeship programs that kind of perked my interest, because when we're new to an organization, some of us may need a bicycle, some are on a 10-speed, and some are on a tricycle. So when you look at it from an equity standpoint, everybody needs something different. We don't all need the exact same thing, because if you put us all on that same 10-speed, all of our legs may not be able to reach down to those pedals. It's down to where we want to get to. So just keeping that in mind as we are onboarding new folks into the organization, is that everyone is at a different point, and they need, from an equity standpoint, different assets to accentuate their capabilities. So
that's a really good point, that it's not one size fits all. I definitely don't need the same things that another new hire might need. So that's a really good point. Thank you for bringing that up. Claire, it looked like you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I keep jumping in, but
You're fine.
I also think it's, and it really is company specific, but so Amazon is a larger company and we have clients across the nation, across the globe. But certainly I would say having conversations with your supervisor, your leadership chain early and often. When I first came in the door, I shared very transparently that I'm not co-located with my husband, but I have two young kids, very young kids. I have a newborn or an infant now, and I have a 5-year-old. And so at some point, my head's going to explode if once the infant has started moving. So it's getting more challenging. At some point, I may want to bring the family unit back together. And so started having conversations about what that would look like and how my business might, move. And I always remind people who've reached out, my employer is not my bestie, right? They're an employer, they're in it to make sure that the clients are getting what they need. And so what I asked for was a portfolio work clients that were across the country, so that if I move to a different part of the country, it is not felt by my clients. So it's not like all of my clients are in Washington. And so if I move to DC, all of my clients are like, we never get FaceTime with Claire. Claire's never available to see us. She's not responding during normal work hours. My clients are across the country. So my East Coast clients feel the burn, just like my West Coast clients. It's equal opportunity, right? Yeah. And so I would just think about, as you walk into that company, what is the value offering? What is the client service that you're supposed to deliver? And how can you position your work, if at all, to make sure that it doesn't change depending on where you are?
That's a really great point. That's very smart of you, but that's a really great practice, that if we're able to do that, make that happen. Great. Actually, Claire, I have a question for you, so we'll pivot back to you. I know you are obviously have been through PCSs throughout your career. So let's talk about it, since you are an employer, employment attorney, employer side, I should say. Let's talk about it from their perspective. What accommodations have you seen at Amazon that have been made for military spouses that you think have mutually benefited both the military spouse and the employer? And is there anything that you have tried in the past, or that you've seen tried in the past or heard about, that didn't work?
Yeah. So as the employment attorney, I'm going to stay away from the word accommodations because I think of like ADA.
Yes.
So I'm going to push that to the
You
side.
gotta-
I'm going to focus on like what working relationships I've seen work really well. And I honestly, again, I'm just going to point back to that early communication, like to the extent that you can establish a work portfolio that anticipates a move. If you can get a clear understanding of what your clients are looking for. So is it that your clients really want FaceTime? Is it that your
Mhm.
clients just want you available during working hours? And I think those are the kind of questions that not everybody is comfortable asking, like when you're in the application interview phase. But I would
Mhm.
start laying the groundwork for that when you get hired. And I think, again, going back to an earlier comment, the first way to do that is to build that military spouse acumen, right? Like when I started, none of the members of my leadership team have ever had a military spouse hire, as far as I know. And
Mhm.
so part of it was explaining, hey, here are some of the challenges that I have, and here's a gap of time where I might not be as available, and here's why. And to Susie's point, here's what a PCS stands for. And no, it's not permanent. It actually happens all the
All
time.
the time.
And sometimes I think we're going here and we're actually going here. Or no, we really don't have furniture for a very long time because it's either broken or missing. And so here's like why I'm not responsive. And so those kind of things that, sometimes are just very real life to us. We live it so much that we don't communicate it, but communicating it is education for that leader. And then they get better grounded in, okay, these are the unique needs of this employee. And at the same time, I see this employee is committed, they're engaged, and they're delivering great outcomes. So how do I keep this employee? Okay, here's how I do it. Going back to Susie, flexibility, remote work, and all of those things that allow us to have more robust careers. So that's what I've seen work the best is communication.
I like that you mentioned, clear communication and transparency, because we definitely, as military spouses in our community, we hear about multiple approaches. Is it better not to say anything, and kind of more or less hide who we are and the challenges that we're facing? Or is it better to be fully transparent and to your point, to educate, to use it more as an education tool for the employer? And when you're performing well, wanting them to retain you, and how can we work with that person? So I'm glad that you explained why your approach is transparency and clear communication, because we do get mixed signals both inside of our community and from employers.
Yeah.
So thank you for
you have
sharing
to
that.
feel comfortable with it, but I think ultimately if you're going to position yourself to move, it's
Yes.
helpful to grease those wheels so you're not sitting down one day like, hey, let me tell you more about myself. I'm actually moving to the middle of nowhere and I want you to come with me. So
I can see how that would be one of those uncomfortable conversations to wait to drop that shoe. Susie, did you have something to add to that?
No, I was just going to say on the comment that you made, Kate, about whether or not to kind of lead with, I'm a military spouse, here's who I am, or do I keep that in the background? I have found that our clients at SRD, which are mostly Fortune 500 companies, global investment banks, private equity firms, when I educate them about our teams here, they are so interested and so intrigued. And they were like, yes, we were interested in working with you because you're a woman-owned firm, but this is a whole other layer. And then they meet our team, and it turns out that our team leaders for our largest workflows here are all military spouses. And that happened because they were the most capable members of the team. But I think that getting in front of it and explaining who you are and what you need is a great strategy. And I don't think that serious employers would be afraid of that.
Good. It's great to hear it from an employer perspective. That's something that I feel like is missing from our internal community conversations so much. So it's really nice to have candid insight for once, and not having to, kind of make that balancing act in how much I should show of myself to my employer or not. So thank you for those insights. Let's see. Actually, Susie, I have the next question for you. How do you view a resume gap, or one that shows someone who has job hopped frequently, more or less is the term? What do you recommend someone do to explain these factors at the application phase? And is that different from what you would recommend in the interview stage?
So it's a really interesting question, and I think I have a different perspective on this. Before I started SRD Legal Group, I had a legal staffing business called Bliss Lawyers, and I started that business in 2011 and sold it in 2020 to our largest strategic competitor, Axiom. So during that window of 9 years, I saw close to 40,000 resumes of attorneys, which is what made our business very interesting to Axiom. But that gap for military spouse, for me, I don't care about it. I understand it. I understand the military lifestyle. I understand opportunities were not provided. And I hire for attitude and ability, and not based on what have you done, but what can you do? And so I think, to answer your question specifically, to explain, educate your potential employer about the military lifestyle and what it means, and talk about how you want to add value and your desire to be a member of a team and make a contribution. And I think that will really resonate with employers. Oh, you're muted, Kate. Sorry. Kate, we don't hear you. You're on mute.
Sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
My mind is still reeling from 40,000 resumes the second you said that. But thank you for sharing those insights. It's definitely something that we all go into applications and interviews with a bit of trepidation. So knowing this definitely helps, and hearing your insight is part of that conversation for us. Great. So bonus question time, and I want this to go to all three panelists. Feel free to share your opinions or your expertise on this. So simply being a military spouse doesn't mean that we're 100% perfect at everything. Can you share some strategies for how you set expectations for job performance, or if you're the military employee, how your job performance expectations are set that enable you to evaluate military spouses on the same yardstick as a civilian, but then also allow you to give tailored constructive feedback when their performance falls short? And have you ever had to fire a military spouse attorney for or military spouse for cause? And was that different than when you had to terminate a civilian employee? So take that question in whatever direction you'd like to share, but feel free, any of you who have, any three of you who have an answer to that, please volunteer.
So I'll jump in. I have not had the misfortune to fire a military spouse, so that's good.
Yes, that is good.
And I would, again, this might be the employment lawyer lean, so apologies, but I actually wonder why military spouses would be treated differently than civilian attorneys. And so I would say, if you find that happening, that's a problem in and of itself. And I mean, to William's point, everybody comes with their own unique skill sets and superpowers. And so and so everybody is judged not only based on their outcomes, but what they bring to the table. But hopefully it's not so, the dichotomy is not like military spouse performance and civilian performance. And if you find that you're at the wrong organization, don't leave right away because you need that paycheck, but find a new place to be.
Right. Do you have, and especially because you're employer side, do you have any suggestions for individuals that find themselves in that situation? Because I think that unfortunately could be a reality for people in our community.
And it seems like it from the chat. I mean, I think it'd be helpful to know, do we think that's happening because everybody is physically located somewhere and our military spouses are moving? Is it a perception about what military spouse attorneys bring to the table? Or do we know kind of why that's happening or how it shows up? And maybe the other panelists know, or maybe the folks can drop it in the chat. But
William, I think you had something to add.
Well, I haven't had the, again, as Claire mentioned, I never fired a military spouse, attorney, paralegal, or paraprofessional or legal administrator. We've always worked through issues, be it putting them on a performance improvement plan or counseling, but have always been able to move forward for the most part. But if this, as I'm seeing in the chat, that folks are saying this is rampant, that certainly is alarming and something that definitely needs to be addressed. I think you start at the lowest possible level in terms of with the supervisor, HR, and if you have to go higher up the chain of command to get those issues addressed, whether it's individually or if you see it as something that's been done collectively to other military spouses within your organization. One other piece I wanted to add is that all military spouse attorneys weren't in private practice the whole time or government the whole time. Some were actually in the military as lawyers, and now they're seeking positions in the as a civilian attorney. And one of the challenges that I've seen in some organizations is the practice leads or the hiring managers or the hiring committees, they really don't know what military lawyers do and don't understand that. For example, I was a labor law attorney. We negotiated collective bargaining agreements with the AFL-CIO, the AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. I was a litigator on both sides, a law professor, and practice in health law, all these different areas. But some employees think that military lawyers, all they did was, you can't handle the truth, right? It's like a few good men.
Yeah.
But that's far from the case. The military and the lawyers are practicing in the largest law firm in the world and in every single area of legal specialty. So part of that challenge is those of us who are within these organizations is to, as you mentioned earlier about those who are applying to educate, but those who are a part of the organization to educate from the inside about what military lawyers who are spouses do as they're seeking positions, because we need to be on those hiring committees. We need to be educating those hiring committees. We need to be talking to those hiring managers and those practice leads in those legal areas so that they have a full understanding. So
I'm glad you brought that up because I definitely feel throughout my career, even in government, that as military spouses, we don't just have to advocate for ourselves, but for the people that come after us. And we have to be good ambassadors for not just our own futures, but the future of the military spouse and the military community as a whole, especially transitioning veterans. So I think that's something that I have felt keenly in my own experience. So I'm glad to hear you sharing that as well, in being important to our relationship with possible employers and our current employers. Susie, I think you wanted to add.
Yeah, sure. So I wanted to say that I feel like this is a very distinct moment in time where there is an opportunity to change the conversation about military spouses. And what previously was viewed as a lack of commitment due to the need to move, and some of the questions I've seen in the chat, how long will you be here? You're not as committed as the other lawyer sitting next to you. I think there's a new conversation to be had in this post-pandemic world, and that is we are more committed, because if you can tailor a position to meet my needs, if I'm a military spouse, if you can find a way to work with me so that my job is remote and portable, I am going to be truly committed and dedicated. And I have seen firsthand from my own experience how productive and high performing military spouse lawyers are. And it's having that conversation and turning the tables and saying, my status as a military spouse is not going to be a detriment. You are going to be able to retain me. I will be committed if you can meet me where I am today. And what I've noticed because I've been now through, with a couple of the attorneys here, like 3 moves. And if I feel like what works for a military spouse today may change tomorrow. They may want to work in a different time zone. If you're a global company, you can accommodate that. We can certainly accommodate that here. We have attorneys who work on teams in multiple time zones. But I really do think that the world is ready for the conversation, and here's why. We have all had the experience of working remotely during COVID. Everybody went home and was sitting from their home offices. And they now understand that you can perform at a high level from home, be productive, and have high output, and that you're not on a frolic. By being at home doesn't mean that you're not committed and you're out having a party. So now that we all have had that shared experience, people understand that it is a fair ask to say, I would really like you to consider having this position be remote. Here's why. And I think the time for those conversations is now.
I agree. And I'm just looking at some of the chat conversations. Some of it's to host and panelists. So I'm not sure everybody sees it, but like, how long will you be here? I mean, I think to the extent that you feel you can, I think I would respond, as long as you're willing to keep me. And as long as the work is fulfilling for me and I'm engaged. The question is, can I eventually move this work remote? Now, I will say, again, like, employers are not your bestie. So, I think Tamara mentioned, or Tamara, depending on where the emphasis is in your name, so sorry, but mentioned an unfortunate situation as an applicant. I'm not sure you want to work for that employer, but if you do, you might want to query, what is it about my military spouse? What is it about me as a military spouse that gives you pause? Because maybe this is an opportunity to share more about what I bring to the table, but also demystify or debunk some of the things that maybe you've heard. Now, you may not want to engage in that teaching moment because that's not really fair to you. But what I would say is Susie's right. I mean, we're at a unique point in time where remote work is kind of more favored among companies that never considered it. You may have seen earlier in the year, Amazon was saying how office-centric it is. It probably still is, but it also understands where the talent is now, and that talent is looking to be more remote. So this is a great opportunity to start pushing on some of those companies that perhaps were not as flexible before. But back to my comment about employers not being your bestie, the reason why I mentioned that is you may have to give a little too. So it may be a good time to bargain, to say, hey, I see you have an office, it's about an hour from where I'm going to be, or an hour and a half. What if I come in, for the first 6 months, once a week? Think about what you're willing to give that employer to say, hey, what's important? Is it FaceTime? Is it building those client relationships? Are you concerned I won't be able to do that in person? What can I do to demonstrate that commitment to the company, that I can build and foster those relationships, but still, respect the fact that I'm not going to be able to come in every day. And so think about personally what you're willing to do, and what that company is willing to help do to get you there.
That's really great. William, did you have something to add?
Well, there's such great input that's being put in on the chat. I'm trying to read.
No,
them.
I see it running. You're like, oh my gosh, all great.
So some jobs do ask for specialized experience, and someone asked the question, what do I do? I move so much, so I don't get an opportunity to specialize in those areas. There are things you can do to develop your specialty in those areas, even while you're moving. And so some of those opportunities are volunteer-based, some of them are education-based, where you can get more education in those particular areas, and also writing. You can write in those areas, get published in those areas, give seminars in those areas. And those things you can do remotely as you're moving from place to place, and build up your background experience and your in those areas of specialty. So I just wanted to address that question.
That's a really good
Yeah.
point. I find I struggle with that as well. I've been a generalist for 15 years because I've moved so much, but you find what you're interested in and those other opportunities outside of the formal employment relationship to develop that specialty. So I think I'm glad that you highlighted that, because I know that's definitely a concern for people in this community.
The other
well,
thing,
Yeah,
sorry,
go
Kate.
ahead.
The other thing I've seen people do in terms of their resume, which addresses it helps kind of smooth over the employment gaps, but also gets to that specialty, is they reorganize their resume to focus on skill sets and like outcomes instead of individual experiences. So it might say, you know, negotiator, or leader, or something that's more skill based, and then examples of outcomes that they've delivered that highlight that skill set, and then parentheses or represented some other way as the job, so that it's less apparent the different gaps, and it's more like a list of your accomplishments. So just something to consider, maybe changing the format.
Yeah, I've definitely seen that recently in looking at some resumes of colleagues, that there's this reformatting change that is taking that on head on, especially with somebody who is a generalist, but you want to see what kind of accomplishments and competencies and skills that they have. So thank you so much for sharing that. Unfortunately, we are out of time, and we're going to be moving to the virtual career fair after this. So I wanted to thank all of our panelists today for this discussion and for highlighting your expertise and your experience. Thank you for everyone who engaged in the chat. Obviously, there was a really great discussion in there and really great content. And thanks everyone for giving your time so generously today. We really appreciate it. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Rachel.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rachel Fielder. I'm the Community and Events Director for MSJDN. I'm excited that you guys joined us for today's Making the Right Moves event. We're going to head over to Toucan for today's career fair. Toucan is a platform that's going to let you interact virtually in a more natural way. It's the same platform that we used for the happy hour last week. So if you were there for that, it's the same thing. The link to Toucan is going to be dropped into the chat in just a minute. If you haven't already, you are going to need to create a Toucan account to sign in. And it runs on a desktop or laptop computer. For the best experience, you're going to want to use Chrome, or if you're using a tablet, they recommend using Safari. You also need to make sure that you give Toucan access to your microphone and to your camera. And if you run into any technical issues getting logged in, feel free to email me at events@msjdn.org. When you sign into Toucan, you're going to see yourself and all the other participants as small circles kind of floating around the screen, and you're going to see meeting spots for different employers at the career fair. If you'd like to talk to a certain employer, just hover over their meeting spot and press join. You'll either be able to join a conversation that's already in progress, or if the recruiter is having a one-on-one conversation, the meeting spot is going to serve as a waiting room for you. We also have a couple of MSJDN networking meeting spots set up so you can connect with other attendees throughout the events. Irene from Bossed Up, who's helped us coordinate the conference, will be over in Toucan, and she can help you navigate the platform. If you need any help, just join her at the help desk table if you need anything. We hope to see you guys over in Toucan soon.